All right, let's get
But
started.
okay. Yeah, I said. Okay. I'm ready.
You ready? All right, let's get started.
I'm pissed off and ready.
You're pissed off and ready? Okay, let's do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of From the North. As always, it's your boy Eduardo from Toronto and Germania from New York. How's it going, Germania?
Here I am. We are cold. It's been like the craziest cold front, but
it's so cold. They had I read a tweet the other day that they had the lowest recorded temperatures in the history of the United States in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I saw something like that. If I'm cold over here, I can't imagine you up north.
Oh, it's so cold. It's so cold. It's stupid. It's cold. It's snowing a lot. I don't know why I didn't move to Costa Rica. I should have thought it through. But here we are, nonetheless. Today's episode, we wanted to talk about, probably going to talk about different things. But one of the things that we wanted to discuss is one of our favorite U.S. politicians, we love her.
She actually is a great character because she exemplifies so many of the things we talk about. So
that is true, and her name is Ilhan Omar. So, for those of you who don't know, Ilhan Omar is a congresswoman for the Democratic Party.
Part of the Democratic Socialist of America, part of the squad.
Part of the squad, so like the more radical, progressive wing of the Democratic Party, even though I don't know if I could call her progressive.
A refugee from Somalia who should have more sympathy.
She's a refugee like me. But I think that's as much as I can relate to her, because for pretty much everything else, I think I disagree with most of the things that she says. And what is the new development involving this character in Washington? Tell me about it.
So, last week, was this last week? Or no, it was actually this week today. We're filming on Sunday. Now the GOP has taken control of the House of Representatives with new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, which I don't know, Elu, if you were seeing this, but it took like 18 votes to get Kevin McCarthy.
It was so funny. It was so funny.
It's just a mess all around. I mean, again, everything I'm about to say about Ilhan Omar does not mean that I think Republicans are much better. Again, I think it's I could barely follow along with what Kevin McCarthy was saying, because the whole time I'm like, am I supposed to forget that you barely got elected? Like, what authority do you have over any decision if it took you that long to get elected as leader of the House of Representatives? But he got it done. He got the extremists on his party. He actually pleased the extremists in his party, which were the ones that were not voting for him. So he convinced extremists in his party, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that he would be, pleasing a true Republican, that he would do things like what he did with Ilhan Omar. We have talked in this podcast a lot about Ilhan Omar, and if you follow me on Twitter, you have seen my take on that. Ilhan Omar gets in trouble in the mainstream media only for her anti-Semitic remarks. Because sadly, that's what people seem to care about in the first world, because usually people like Ilhan Omar who say anti-Semitic things are also part of the first world tankies. The first world tankies who, let's go through what are the qualifications of a first world tankie, a la Jeremy Corbyn, a la Bernie Sanders. They support sanctions only against Israel. Any other sanctions are seen as the U.S. being an evil power and hurting the people of countries like Venezuela, like Syria, like Iran, like Cuba. Ilhan Omar's position is that sanctions against the countries under left-wing dictatorships are inappropriate and are only going to hurt the citizens. However, sanctions, including the movement to boycott all things Israeli, she supports, because for some reason her internal bias, is the Israeli government and Israeli citizens do deserve that punishment. So Ilhan Omar has been in trouble mostly, as I said, for these anti-Semitic remarks. Venezuelans, Syrians, Iranians, Turkish people who have been yelling for years, hey, this woman supports our dictators and we don't like it. That's not progressive. She has said protests in Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua are all propped by the CIA. They're all coups. You know the drill if you watch this show. Well, the Republicans, probably because of all the bad reasons, decided to remove Ilhan Omar from the Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the most important committees in Congress. Mind you, Marjorie Taylor Greene should not be in that committee either. But Ilhan Omar, I'm very glad was kicked out, because do I want someone who says that Chavismo was good and sanctions was the problem in the committee that's in charge of international relations, that's in charge of promoting democracy abroad and Western democracy? No. So I am happy that Ilhan Omar is finally out of that committee. Now, how did the left react? Not only the left, but all of Democrats. They made it a completely bipartisan thing. Every Democrat, including moderates like Amy Klobuchar, who have nothing to do with the politics of Ilhan Omar. They're just forced to be in the same party because of the two-party system. They're all saying the same thing. Ilhan Omar has been kicked out of her committee position because she's a black Muslim migrant or refugee because of her religion. Elu, it's so disgusting to me because they know why.
I think you nailed it on the point that, and this is probably the biggest issue that I see right now in the bipartisan dynamics that are in place at the moment in Washington. On the Republican side, they had to get approval from the most radical, disgusting, far right people like Marjorie Taylor Greene to get elected, to get the Speaker of the House elected, right? And on the other side of the aisle, now you see the Democrats all closing lines behind one of the most radical representatives that they have. One that it's I like and agree with you 100%. Following her remarks on Venezuela, on Syria, her Turkey, specifically Turkey, it's a very sensitive topic with her. Instead of saying, you know what, maybe she shouldn't be there to begin with, they're just using this opportunity to take just to score points on the Republican, because it's so easy, right? She's a refugee, she's a woman of color, she's a Muslim, when they're kicking her out because of all these things, which, to be fair, it's in the minds of the Republican, it's probably what they're thinking of. But what gets missed in the discussion is the nuance. It's the nuance of, okay, but should she really be in this position to begin with?
Let's look at what she has said. Let's look at how she has voted. But no. Nobody
Let's just close lines and, pander to the most radical side of our party.
Which I do want to mention something, going back to the vote for McCarthy. It does show the state of the party a little bit, at least with when Pelosi was voted as speaker, because someone like Nancy Pelosi also had the extremists in her party who didn't want her to be Speaker of the House. Who are the people Nancy Pelosi had to crush before the vote happened? Ilhan Omar, AOC. But she did it before the vote happened, because Nancy Pelosi is a master legislator and would never go to the floor if she didn't have the votes. So you see how both parties have the same issue. However, at least Nancy Pelosi was able to crush them before the votes even happened. The Republican Party had to give in to them.
No. And if you think about it, the most radical position on both extremes of the aisle, it's very similar. We haven't mentioned that in a minute, but Horseshoe, yet again, scores another point. It's to take the U.S. further down the road that they've been in since pretty much 10, 12 years now, which is isolationism.
And then the right, they tell you different excuses. The right says, why should we spend our money in the rest of the world? and then the extremists on the left say we are the issue everywhere in the world. Why would we get involved further?
And also, why should we be spending money on this when we could be
True,
spending money?
true. That's
Like
true.
they have the same talking point. They just coming at it from different
That's
angles.
true, but it's so confusing because they are fiscally conservative when it comes to, yeah, foreign policy, but then everything else, let's throw a blank check for whatever bill, Green New Deal AOC comes out with next.
It's because that's the excuse that you want to sell to the voters. Oh, why should we use your, so hard-earned taxpayer money to fund all of these things across the globe
when we don't have free healthcare, for example.
When we don't have free healthcare, for example. And, from the Republicans, it's very easy. It's money. Why are we going to use your money on things that don't affect you, right? And I think, and that's like something that it's very important that this discussion is being had as to like what should be the position of the United States when it comes to foreign policy. And to answer that, I think you just have to look at how the global stage has developed over the last 5 years, over the last 6 years, as a consequence of having a very isolationist precedent in Washington, right? Like we have now it's been a year, I think. When did the war in Ukraine start last year?
A year now, last February.
Last February. I think it was by the end of February, but we're getting close to that by the time that we're recording this episode. And what was the response at first from these like very radical people? And like even to this day, it's still like, well, maybe we should find a consensus. Like, well, maybe we should like talk to Putin and see what should be the outcome of this.
Weren't there some votes regarding the Ukraine war? There's been many votes where the far left and the far right have voted together, and I think it's usually about funding. Like
it's usually about funding. It's usually, I remember like when the sanctions started in Russia, the talking point is like, oh, why should we make the people of Russia suffer for like the actions of their leaders?
When the Juan Guaido interim government was happening in Venezuela, and when sanctions against the Venezuelan regime, Ilhan Omar was one of the faces on Democracy Now! Outlets like that saying this was all a CIA propped coup. So this is, again, it's a similar rhetoric to any country that's aligned with Russia. She's going to say the sanctions and the US are actually the problem.
And it's such an easy scapegoat for any like problem that's going on in the world. But what I can't get my head around is that how they cannot see that this is actually detrimental to the US. And my answer is like, they see it, they know it, they know the consequences of having an isolationist foreign policy when it comes to the US. The consequences that's going to have around the world, we're seeing it now. And the consequences that it's going to have on the US itself, we're seeing it now. There's the biggest migrant crisis in the US right now. I think it's Cuba and Venezuela again. So there's an agenda behind the things that they are doing. I don't necessarily think that they're being they're colliding with someone like Russia directly to do this. I don't think that.
I don't think so either, and that's even worse to me, because I think these congresswomen are the product of a cultural shift that we have been seeing. I mean, I always talk about it. Like at my fancy university, they told me Chavez was good and the U.S. was the problem. There's just a generational shift where hating the U.S. is the cool thing. It's almost like a trend. I was sending Elu like tweets of Venezuelans who were like, they didn't want to come out too strongly against Ilhan Omar because they now live in the U.S. They're progressives. Their friends are progressives. Their friends love Ilhan Omar. They love AOC. They don't want to be the party pooper. Who wants to be the party pooper to say, actually, I'm okay with what the Republicans did because Ilhan Omar is, a tanky. Nobody wants to say that. So
I have the same issue here in Canada with my friends because all like hip, cool people in Canada, they support the left-wing party, the NDP, right? And the NDP is a party that, like the U.S. progressives, is very anti-sanctions. And like for example, in the case of Russia, in the case of Syria, Venezuela, Canada has been one of the main countries when it comes to sanctions, when it comes
Totally.
to accepting refugees, when it comes to all that. And this is a party that's very against sanctions, very against interventionism. So every time that I have this conversation, it's like, oh, the politics in Ottawa are pretty shit right now. And it's like, yeah, because we're not voting in the NDP. And I'm like, actually, no, I pretty much hate them as well. And it's because it's so easy. It's so easy when you look at the status quo and you associate it with the blue versus red, the moderate Republicans versus the moderate Democrats. From whatever side of the aisle you are, if you're left wing, if you're right wing, you wanna vote and you wanna support the disruptors. You wanna vote. You wanna support the populists, the ones that are giving you answers to the questions that nobody wants to give an
Totally.
answer
And also,
to.
you don't want to be seen like you support the other scary side, the other conservative side. I mean, like, I've lost so many followers that I know agree with me politically just because I criticize the Democrats and they see it like, oh, she's a Republican now. Because they see it as a zero sum game. Nobody dares criticize their own side, which is, as I've said so many times, the only way to save our democracy in the United States as it is, with this hyper polarization, is for people to stand against the extremists in their own side, but nobody wants to do that. And then sadly, we see politicians that do try to do that, like, I mean, Dick Cheney's daughter, Liz Cheney, and then her political future was over because
What happened to Kissinger? I don't know what happened to him. He was like very moderate when it came to the Republicans.
I don't. Yeah, it's and then you have, but then it's the same thing. How can I blame? Again, I was shook by the Amy Klobuchar like statement of support against Ilhan Omar. She's like, "Hey, this is all racism, Islamophobia." I'm like, Amy, you're basically an old school Republican. Like, what are you doing?
It's
Like,
this discourse, this radical discourse, is like becoming the mainstream point of view of both parties. We've seen it with the Republican Party, even though they're having their own existential crisis with Trumpism and anti-Trumpism, but it's still a very powerful force within the Republican Party to be extremely MAGA, extremely Trump supporter. Uh, you would have thought that Democrats will be a little bit better at pushing that back when it came to their own radicals. Um, but now, like you said, we have the most moderate Democrats falling for that identity politics bullshit when it comes to denounce what's
the
happening with Illinois.
let's talk about now. This is something very important that I forgot to write in my notes, but thank God I remember. Let's talk about the real world damage of someone like Ilhan Omar in the Foreign Affairs Committee. You probably don't know about this, Edo, and it's about to piss you off. You know, the Iranian journalist we always talk about but never remember her name.
We love her so much, and we
I'll
don't
put
remember.
her here. It's I can't have the worst memory. But you know, she's had assassination attempts in Brooklyn by the Iranian regime. This is a badass woman who's like top 5 enemies of the Iranian regime. And again, her campaign is simple. I want to show my hair. I want to dance. I want people in Iran to be able to be happy. Well, Ilhan Omar had a campaign against this Iranian journalist, saying all the things that they say about freedom fighters against regimes brought by Putin, saying she was connected to, you know, CIA dark powers, that she was not what she was saying she was, that she was not really an activist, that she had dark money behind her, that she was lying about, all the things that they say, that she was a coup monger, a CIA paid agent, someone who just wanted to destabilize Iran. This is someone who is in the US protected because the Iranian regime has sent assassins to get her. And we had a person in Congress's Foreign Affairs Committee saying that this woman is actually an enemy, that we shouldn't protect her. This is just an example of how Ilhan Omar treats
A refugee.
dissidents.
A refugee, mind you. Ilhan Omar is a refugee, and how can she?
If we can put here the thread, I'm gonna send it to you because I shared it. The thread where Ilhan Omar explains that this journalist is actually someone that our country should not support.
What a horrible piece of shit. What a piece of shit. What a tragedy that these people are being the protagonists of American politics.
And this is what pisses me off, Elu, because they framed her ousting as it was because her comments against Israel. It's so much more than that, and sadly, they're making it too easy for people to just say, "Oh, it's because her religion is Islam." But if you ask Syrians, Venezuelans, Iranians against Ilhan Omar, we're not going to be talking about her criticism of Israel, which, by the way, goes beyond criticism. But I'm not going to get on that. She has anti-Semitic comments. There's a difference between being anti-Semitic and criticizing Israel. We don't have to go through that. I'm not going to get into that. But that's not what I care about because I'm Venezuelan. That's not what my Syrian friend cares about. That's not what my Iranian friend cares about. We care that we now have an enemy of the freedom to our countries out of this committee.
Which is good, but then we're getting a lot more enemies from the Republican side into that committee, so...
Well, that's another story. Now, how do we get, because we still have to get the far right outside of it, which, by the way, it's just as dangerous because the new far right is also isolationist. Again, Marjorie Taylor Greene would have a similar take on this Iranian journalist than Ilhan Omar. They probably see them the same exact way.
100%. It's a tragedy, but it's definitely the state of U.S. politics when it comes to foreign policy.
I honestly don't see a way out, because then people always tell me, well, it's a bipartisan system. If you stand against those on your own side, you're just weakening, your one side. So then no one is willing to do it. And then honestly, it's not fun. You have people like me who I insist on talking shit about both sides. It's not a fun path. So I kind of get it.
I think the solution to that, it's not easy. But if it comes from within, there has to be a movement of working bipartisanly with the moderates of both sides. Because at the end of the day, even though we feel this overwhelming fear of radicalization and polarization in not only in the US but every other country, at the end of the day, at least in the United States, most Congress people, most people at the Senate, they're actually moderate. They're
That's
not that
correct.
radical.
So and it's so hard to remember, Edu, though, because again, what we see all the... Oh, no, I had to mention this. The AOC speech, this is against women of color.
It's almost a caricature.
It was a character. Cori Bush behind her couldn't keep her face straight. Cori Bush, she forgot where she was. I mean, Cori Bush started thinking she was at the club. She started going like this. Like a circus. And again, it's their first world privilege because they don't realize that people in Venezuela, Syria, Iran, Cuba are affected by the decisions made in the Foreign Affairs Committee. It's not a joke to us. It's not let me show how hood I am. First of all, the black scent is so offensive. I don't know why she is allowed to just regardless, it's a joke. And the decisions made by this committee and Congress at large are not a joke. So to me, that was disgusting. AOC is an actress, and I'm ashamed of the U.S. Congress on that day over the whole circus. I had to. Can we also put the dance here?
Alright, we can put the dance out here.
I don't understand. And also, always driving down on the stereotype about Latinas, right? It's like she has this, and she's not even like that. This woman was born in New York, highly educated from a successful family. This is not someone who is the ghetto Latina we see on TV. But she has to play into the stereotype, and todo mal. That's all I have to say.
How much damage has Sofia Vergara done to the Latino community?
I used to go on rants about that because I think it is damaging. Because
of course it is.
And yeah, we start with Sofia Vergara and Modern Family, and it's the same thing with AOC. AOC is so smart. Why do you have to put up the ass?
Sofia Vergara is so smart.
She was
what did she have to?
She was she is smart, of course, because thanks to that stereotype playing, she became the highest paid actress in the United States. But what does that do to how Americans see Hispanic women, which, by the way, are the lowest paid people in the United States, even less than black women. But no, we have AOC showing that actually we are Jenny from the block.
It's ridiculous. It's a caricature. It's a picture of where we are at, or where the U.S. is at as a culture, at least in the politics. But I think, like I was gonna say, I think the solution to that is for voters on both sides of the aisle to press their representatives in Washington to work with more moderate solutions to the issues that the United States is going through right now. I believe, like, honestly, I believe, like, if you put all this bipartisan crap aside, if you stop with the demagoguery, with the populism, and you actually get things done, uh, these radicals are just gonna fade away because they are the ones that can never get things done. We're already seeing it. Like, how many things, how many bills has like AOC or Ilhan Omar actually get passed through at Washington?
Right, Elu, but my concern is the cultural impact. The fact that I cannot discuss these things with my American friends because they will not accept that AOC is not a progressive goddess, queen, Latina
That's what they've been fed.
idol.
That's why they've been fed by like CNN or Fox News if you're watching it from another perspective. That's what they're being fed. They're being fed that, oh, you know, it's a turf war, and you gotta, if you're blue, you gotta be blue, and if you're red, you gotta be red, and like it doesn't go beyond that.
I will say, one of the comments by Democrats that I thought was most appropriate, given that most of the comments were like, this is only because she's black and Muslim. The new leader of the Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, who I'm liking a lot. He's a stud. He speaks well. He has the Obama swag. He, in his speech about Ilhan Omar, I mean, he did say, of course, because he had to, that she shouldn't be removed, that this was all because Republicans are xenophobic. However, he did acknowledge that Ilhan Omar has made mistakes, which is more than any other Democrat did, because every other Democrat was like, this is a saint, and there could be no other reason than racism. Hakeem Jeffries at least said she has made some mistakes. I'm so desperate for 1 ounce.
You said a validation by a politician? Yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm like, I have hope in Hakeem Jeffries. Like, let's hope. But I also have hope, Elu, and this is something we're going to talk about as we get closer to the presidential election. The GOP seems to have broken the MAGA spell. All that I hear, all the politicos I know, all the former MAGA people that I see online, they prefer DeSantis.
But here's the thing about DeSantis, though, and like I've been looking into this lately, because yeah, by the looks of it, if it's not gonna be Trump, DeSantis is probably gonna be the next candidate, and if Biden decides to run again,
the next president, exactly.
So DeSantis is probably gonna be the next president of the U.S. the way the things are right now. If I had to take a guess, and even though you cannot really compare to Trump in the sense of how radical the discourse is, the demagoguery, the populism, it's taken straight out of Trump that DeSantis uses.
Mm-hmm.
And even if your policies are not that radical, that's still very damaging to your democracy.
I agree, but sometimes I think, like, I've thought about the DeSantis thing a lot, and maybe it's like a transition to like, he's a good person to maybe transition to ethics and like I mean, politicians have always been unethical, but you know what I mean, like how things used to be, because he is not in paper and even in rhetoric. Part of what the Republicans that I've seen like about DeSantis over Trump is they keep saying, like, we don't have to apologize for or explain DeSantis so much. You know, DeSantis is very dangerous in many ways, but DeSantis doesn't give speeches where he calls Mexicans rapists. He's much more careful with that, which could make him more dangerous if the paper politics are actually extremists. So I mean, it did. But the thing in Florida has been.
Remember, this is the guy that has kicked out like thousands of Venezuelans out of Florida and Texas and send them in buses to cities that were not prepared to attempt it.
Yes. But
Like,
the situation in Florida has also received a lot of misinformation. For example, remember the Don't Say Gay bill?
mm,
So it wasn't a Don't Say Gay bill. It was literally don't talk about like anything related to the topic until I think second or third grade. Well, it turns out that most people supported that. Democrats, Republicans, and Democrats focused the entire campaign against DeSantis on this because they're so clueless. They think Latinos in Florida, the first thing they're caring about is the Don't Say Gay bill. So they went all out like DeSantis says don't say gay, and we saw what happened. So there's a lot of misinformation about what's really going down in Florida. I was against, of course, the circus moving the migrants. I wrote an op-ed about it, but I'm not a Republican. I think for Republicans, even old school Republicans, that's not gonna be a deal breaker.
I mean, it's not, but that's the issue, is that we keep pushing the boundaries of what a deal breaker is supposed to be
On both
with
sides.
that, on both sides, with that discourse. You know what I mean? Like,
how about the hypocrisies? Hey, we have to talk about the leaked papers, the classified documents, where they raided Mar-a-Lago for the classified documents. A mistake I said from the start. Then turns out that everyone has like classified documents at home. Again, it's like you do it to them, then they're gonna do the same thing to you. Then
it just gets dirtier and dirtier. And that's like, I think it's the issue of figures like Ilhan Omar and figures like DeSantis, because even there's two things, right? It's the policies that you're trying to push and the way that you're pushing for those policies. You can be very moderate, but if you're a demagogue, if you're a populist, that's still damaging to
it's still, and that's
democracy.
totally, and that's what I meant. Why it's so dangerous for moderate Democrats to be playing the game about Ilhan Omar, just how Republicans did it with Trump. I mean, again, I'm not repeating the Republican thing because we've talked about it a lot, and like, yes, but to me, seeing not one Democrat say, actually, I'm not gonna die on this hill was super concerning to me. Like, there was also another thing I wanted to talk about. We haven't talked in so long, just you and I feel like.
Well, there's another thing. There's foreign policy crisis that involves the U.S. and Canada with China, because of a weather balloon. Apparently.
Did the balloon fly over Canada?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. So if you guys don't know what we're talking about, there was a freaking balloon by the Chinese government flying over Montana and parts of Canada.
There was two.
Two balloons,
there was three. There was two over the U.S. and one in Latin America.
This is amazing. And they said that the Chinese government response is that it's a weather balloon that went off course, and they apologized
but
for
I
it.
was like, how did it go off course from China and ends up in the middle of North America?
In the middle, like in the Midwest, like that doesn't happen as an accident, mind you. I was wondering, like, why would the Chinese want to like spy on Montana? And as I start reading into like the articles talking about this, turns out that one of the U.S. nuclear silos, I think there are 3 that are actually active. One of them is in Montana.
But Elu, you're an engineer. Do you really think, like, because I've heard that they have satellites that can just look at everything. Is it more like a psychological thing? Because it seems odd. Like, why would China send a visible thing to collect information when they have satellites and also when they have access to our phones through TikTok, you know?
Well, I mean, for technical reasons, I'm not into like space engineering satellites, but I think it's more about sending a message of this is the things that we can get away with, and they got away with it for a while. Like,
no, they totally got away with it. The Biden administration is trying to pretend like we got the balloon. You got it once they had like done the whole thing.
Like, it surveyed the entire Midwest before you like stroke it down. Like. There's an issue there. They're pushing for
and
something.
That is so scary to me, Elu, because I know nothing about math, as you know, but I study political science, and you study game theory, where they're literally statistician. I can't say the word, but experts on statistics who and political science who have an equation. It's game theory. Like, when they were deciding to send this balloon, someone sat there and said, what is the likeliness that the US will respond? Like, how risky is this? And they figured out correctly that it was safe enough to send it. It's the same thing that the US did when seeing how to react to the balloon. It's math. And someone decided that it would be too risky to shoot down the balloon.
To shoot it down.
So,
yeah. So the equation is tilted on the side of the Chinese.
Exactly.
I think this is just China poking at the U.S. to see what the response time and the manner of response is to this type of events. Because obviously they're preparing something with Taiwan.
Well, officials said that they have seen plenty of balloons like this. It's not a new thing. Like they said, yeah, we've seen balloons like this before. This one's different because it's stuck around longer.
So they've been doing it for a minute.
It's not the first time those balloons appear, according to the Pentagon.
Oh, man. And
guess what the route in Latin America was? It went all through Venezuela. I'm sure, it was better, it was, exactly over Venezuela and Latin America.
Oh, that's fucking hilarious. So I think they're just testing their grounds to see, what a U.S. response would be to, meddling within North America, within... It got past NORAD. That's concerning. This is very concerning.
But this is what I don't understand, because to go back to what the people like Ilhan Omar and the tankies think, that the CIA is in everything, spying everywhere, controlling everything. I'm I sure fucking hope so, because right now we're looking, dumb to me. I'm are we spying? I fucking hope so.
Doesn't look like it, or we're not doing a good job at it.
Oh, wait, and to go back to that, I'm sure you read the takes about the balloon from the tankies. The US must have 1 million invisible balloons across the world and no one cares. Do you remember Vietnam? So shut up.
Do you remember World War I? Oh my god, bro. America's such an evil empire.
Exactly. Leave the balloon alone. She's just chilling.
Oh my god. I think we made this episode about stupid discourse. And there's been another thing that has brought up a lot of stupid conversation, especially from the left, which is Mr. Beast's video. Have you actually seen it?
No, but you explained to me, so now I understand. I'm not going to see it. I just need you to explain, so go ahead.
So, Mr. Beast is a famous YouTuber that's famous for spending a lot of money in his videos. He just has so much money. I think there's money laundering behind that. There's no explanation to why this guy has so much money. But I digress. The point is that this guy, for content, paid 1,000 people to get eye surgery. So blind people that were not able to see, they have very deteriorated eyesight. He paid for the surgery so they could see again. And the video is very emotional, obviously, as every operation that allows the blind person to see again. But what a lot. And this is a blanket term, I'm not going to say that everyone was doing it, but a lot of left-wing influencers were mad at the guy for doing this because he was doing something for content. And what about the people that he actually helped out? Helped out 1,000 people to see, but that doesn't matter because he has a lot of money and he's a capitalist and he shouldn't be doing that. So there's no win with these guys. Everything's
again, and look, it's the same thing we were talking about, how they're fiscal conservative. You can see it in this Discord, because the right would have been why would someone spend money helping the blind? You're teaching them to live off the state, those parasites. And then the left, oh my god, capitalism, don't help the blind.
It's so terrible, but it does bring up an interesting discussion, is that why did it have to be the goodwill of a very millionaire guy?
And was this in the States, Aaron? Does he live
mostly
in the States?
Mostly in the States, but he did pay for surgery for people all over the world.
Okay.
But a lot of the people in the US, and this is something that I don't understand. How is it possible that there are people in the States who cannot see and could see?
I mean, agreed.
Surgery.
But is capitalism really the problem? Because
it's not capitalism. The issue is the American system.
Well, exactly. And in any case, sometimes capitalism will fill in the spots that the state can't fill. Like, of course, it's terrible that the government is not taking care of this, but then you see how capitalism sometimes steps in. Even like, I always give the example of the space race. Like, the government ran out of money to study space and do NASA, and then the private industry stepped in, and we're back in the game, you know. So sometimes I think it helps.
It does help, and like even socialized healthcare. How do you pay for socialized healthcare? Well, by taxing capitalist
Exactly, which is the
enterprises.
dirty secret that Bernie Sanders supporters refuse to believe when I tell them. They're like, no, 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 you're wrong. Scandinavia is socialist because Bernie
No,
says
it's
so.
not.
But anyway, we also have to discuss. There was something about the things we talk about in Congress. There was a against socialism resolution, and it was dumb because it doesn't do anything. But it was bipartisan, except by like 20
Obviously, yeah.
Democrats who you, I'm sure, know who they
Yeah,
are.
yeah,
But it was something that I was thankful that the majority of Democrats were
yeah,
able to sign and say we're against
yeah.
socialism. That,
And that is a good sign.
as someone who was forced to vote Democrat yeah, always, I guess, because of the two-party system, that gives me tranquility inside.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing, and we always discuss this, but that is one of the things particularly important to the Florida vote. Um,
But you know that's lost, Elu, because of other things, and maybe one we should do an episode about Florida. Florida is lost to the Democrats. Like, it's too late for that resolution. Also, the resolution, of course, was brought on by Republicans because sadly it's always that way. The
but
Democrats
no,
have lost.
but it is a good sign that it's a bipartisan bill and that you have Democrats signing in on it.
As a voter, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what am
Yeah,
I missing that Democrats voted for this? But
yeah,
I'm glad they
no, no,
did.
it's a good thing. It's a great thing. And I guess that's it goes against like what we were saying at the beginning of the episode, but it is true. Even though we are worried about radicalization in both parties, both in the Democrat and the Republican, these are the few signs that we see every now and then that it's not as bad as it looks like. Even though it's a bipartisan bill that doesn't really do anything, it's just a statement. Um, it's nonetheless a very important statement to make. So I'm
Especially
glad that
for
that
the
happened.
party, like that's so helpful for the party. I mean, again, if I was like a Democrat's PR person, like I would do any Democrat that like will strongly stand against socialism and against the extremes in their party will be a star. I think so. I mean, no one has done it to show me, but I think they would be a star in the party.
Absolutely. Who knows? Maybe that will come from the Democrats. Maybe that will come from the Republicans. Maybe we'll get a
I
moderate
mean,
Republican.
to be
May-
honest, like in the last primary, someone like Pete Buttigieg got close, and
oh, Pete
we
Buttigieg is
liked
so
Pete.
cool.
But
Yeah,
I think
Major
now
Pete.
Pete, I don't know if you've been seeing, like I think he messed up accepting that Secretary of Transportation
Transportation.
job
No.
because he's had a lot. I mean, there's been so many issues with that. That may affect him when he wants to run for president, but maybe people will have forgotten by now. We'll see by then. We'll see.
Hopefully. Oh, you know what's also another thing with this like socialist capitalism healthcare thing? Something that's happening in Canada now is that a lot of the media and a lot of like left wing advocates here in Canada are accusing the Premier of Ontario of Americanizing the healthcare system that we have. That's the word that they use. That's the buzzword. Like the thing about the identity of Canada is defined by not being American. That's the whole thing. That like this is the whole identity of Canadians is not being American. So instead of saying, "Oh, they're privatizing healthcare," no, they're
Oh
Americanizing
my
healthcare.
god.
Which I saw a lot. Like I even believed it because I'm seeing the headlines and seeing that on, uh, obviously from like very radical people. But I'm also seeing that on CBC. I'm seeing that on American media reporting the same thing. And when you actually look at it, what it's telling you is that no one's gonna pay for their healthcare like we don't pay for our healthcare here in Canada. It's now expanding where you can access that healthcare to, and it's not only gonna be state-run clinics and hospitals. Now you can go to private clinics and private
Oh my
consults
god,
for
which is
free,
what I
paid by
support.
healthcare.
That will help so much because I
That is what I've
spend
been
a lot of
wanting to.
time, right, right. I spent a lot of time in Canada, and like I hear so many complaints from about the system because it just seems like it's overwhelmed.
It is overwhelmed, and this is what like everyone has been asking for, is like, yeah, okay, like let's use a mixed system, let people have their private clinics, their private,
Ugh.
sessions or whatever, but charge the state instead of charging the people.
Right, which
That's
is
what
not, people think like Bernie Sanders supports something like that. It's not. He supports a system that's overwhelmed in
the
Canada,
single
while
payer
other
system.
Democrats support what Canada is now moving to, a more mixed system that can have support from the private sector, if I understand.
And it's that, it's the buzzwords, it's the way that we're talking about these issues, it's the way that politicians talk about these issues. Because one thing would be, okay, maybe I work for a sensationalistic, outlet, and I want to have a big headline that people can click on because it's
Right.
so wow, yeah, they're Americanizing healthcare. But when you see politicians being the ones that are pushing this narrative because they only want political gain, no, they don't really care about
It's the
solving
phrases,
people's
yeah.
issues.
It's all about the phrases. That's why Medicare for All has been so successful in this. Like now, when I tell a Bernie Sanders supporter that I don't support them, they're just like, "So you don't support healthcare for everyone?" It's so easy to just like, if that's your catchphrase, healthcare for all. It sounds so pretty.
They for how, like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it, but somehow Sanders and uh the other progressives in the Democratic Party have made it so the only public healthcare option that you can have is single payer healthcare, which is, it's probably the next worst thing to what the US currently already has, which is just privatized healthcare. So
I would
I
say that's why they've been so successful lately. That like the Medicare for All thing is everything to that group, because most Americans hear that and they're like, "What can be bad about it? Medicare for all," and they don't and then the progressives have managed to portray the moderates as they don't want healthcare for all. They don't support Medicare for
same with
all.
the Green New Deal. They
Same, exactly.
they say like, oh well, there's an issue. Like a moderate will say, or a Republican will say, it's like, well, like on this bill, you're giving the state the power to nationalize infrastructure, to nationalize transportation, nationalize the internet, nationalize like a lot of things, give unlimited jobs to people in the federal government, uh, and then a few things about the environment. So I'm not gonna vote for this bill. I'm not gonna support this bill. And then the answer is like, oh, you don't care about the environment. You're a negationist. You don't believe in climate change. So like, no, it's those little things that get. And honestly, ask how many people. If you ask how many people know about the Green New Deal, you're probably gonna get 1,000 people. But if you ask them how many of them actually know what's in the Green New Deal, you're gonna get like 10 people.
Same with Medicare for All proposal. It's the same issue. Nobody wants to read the small print, and nobody really wants to be the person, because it's not received well to be like, actually, this is the small print. Nobody wants to hear
Actually, this is
that.
not what it is. Yes, and like, and you also see that a lot in 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 the media. Like the media also fits into this. They want to use this big buzzwords. They want to use like the headline, and they want to stick to the headline, and they don't want to talk about what's left after that. So that's, I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about the age of the internet upon we live right now. Because if you want to get good information, and if you want to get good unbiased content, you can do it, and it's fairly easy to access. But the internet also provides you many ways to access terrible disinformation, fake news, and all these things.
And that's usually more fun than misinformation, sadly.
Yeah, it's so fun because it's so easy. It's like it's entertainment. It's a
Right.
mixture of news and entertainment that it's so damaging to democracy as a whole. And
Um,
that's one advantage that authoritarian governments have, is that because they can control their own narrative, they're only feeding one side of the issue to their own people,
right.
and
It's
that brings
interesting
cohesion.
that you talk about that, which we always talk about, but it's the same issue with the balloon. Like in a democracy, it's harder to deal with what to do with the balloon than, Xi Jinping doesn't have to give anyone explanations about what he does with anything. He doesn't have to please the voters or anyone. There's not going to be protests against him. But Biden has everyone to answer to. So it just makes it more complicated.
And like how many times does like China like violate international airspace or airspace of another country like Taiwan, for example? How many times does North Korea do it with their missiles flying over Korea and Japan?
Ew. And the
But
Chinese Communist Party is now threatening us because we shot down the balloon in the
because they
Atlantic.
just shut down a balloon, like a balloon that was recording intelligence.
They're
So
saying
like,
it's a violation of international law.
oh, is that a violation of international law? Oh, what was your plane doing in like your balloon in Montana, right? Like, that's not a violation of international law, and that's the thing. They're not, and that's, I think that's the at the core of the struggle between democracies and authoritarianisms is that democracies have made themselves so accountable to everyone, which is a good thing. But at the same time, authoritarian regimes are not accountable to anyone, so they can act faster, more decisively, and without actually
They don't
giving
have to
notice of
worry
what they're
about
gonna do.
re-election.
They don't have to worry about re-election. They usually have to worry about how are we gonna make our empire bigger and bigger and bigger. That's why I've been very surprised that still a year now from the war in Ukraine that the world has been able to support Ukraine as much as it has without actually intervening in the conflict directly. Because
But did you see, Ew? Like, it's so obvious how, like, the other Western countries follow what the U.S. is doing. Again, the importance of the United States when we gave them, I don't remember what was it that we just gave them? Tanks or something?
tanks,
Then
yeah.
Germany was like, okay, now we'll give them this. It's like they're all waiting for the U.S. to make a step.
Exactly. And that's the importance of the United States in the international arena. And that's why it cannot just stay on the sidelines and let things happen. And this is a lesson that we should have learned by now. Like, this is what happened with World War I. This is what happened with World War II. When last time that the US was this isolationist, they figured out that they needed to intervene when it was already too late.
That's what we have to remember. Like, in the days before we got into World War II, there were congressmen and congresswomen, well, maybe not congresswomen, but congressmen like Ilhan Omar saying, peace, not war.
Not war
Don't
with
attack
Hitler.
Hitler. Hitler is just doing his own thing. It's not our problem. Like, this has always been the case. We just can't let these people take control of the narrative and of power, of course. Which also, last question, Elu, talking about the pitfalls of democracy. What's the issues that Trudeau is having that people were like demanding his resignation outside where he was eating? Why are people pissed?
They're always asking Trudeau to resign. Like, Canadian politics is not that interesting. I swear to God, it's so boring. Everything that's another thing. That's another issue that democracies are having right now, and I see that in Canada a lot. Every opposition party to Trudeau, their whole slogan, their whole motto, their whole language, the whole way that they refer to their own voters is by saying Trudeau sucks. This is why Trudeau sucks. Look at what Trudeau is doing. Instead of saying, hey, this is how we would do things. This is how these are our proposals. These are the things that we're fighting for. Instead of like, oh, Trudeau ate a chocolate bar at Parliament. That is actually illegal and he should be executed.
Which, by the way, we know in political science that's not a winning strategy. Like, even if it sounds good, voters want to hear what you're going to do. That was a big pitfall with the Democrats and their obsession with talking against the Republicans. At the end of the day, voters want to know how you're going to improve their life. They already know what's wrong with it.
And like it's a losing strategy, but it's the one that keeps taking hold of like every party around the world. It seems that that's just the way, and that's the way that democracies are dying now, because that's the easy pathway to becoming an authoritarian regime. You just gotta keep pandering to the demagogues, to the populism, and then eventually you're gonna become yourself an authoritarian leader. So I don't know, man. I'm just, like always, I'm tired. I'm sad at the state of the world, but
But
we're
at least
still
the
alive.
Chinese balloon has been shot down after it completed its mission.
Thank you, NORAD. What could have we done without you? So Anyway, thank you guys for listening in to another episode of From the North. Stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to listen
Yeah,
on
say all the
Spotify.
things. Like, subscribe, comment,
Like,
and
subscribe,
if you have
comment.
any topics that you'd like us to talk about or whatever, comment, DM, whatever, we want to keep like the discussion open, and there's just so many things to talk about. So yeah, get in it with us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye, guys. Bye.